A wonderful day to everyone and welcome to the second online scientific meeting. To welcome everyone for today's activity, let us welcome the President of the Philippine Pediatric Society, the indefatigable Dr. Jocelyn Eusebio.
Thank you, KG. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the second webinar of the PPS Committee on Scientific Meetings in cooperation with the CPD Online and Child Health Informatics Committees. We continue with the relevant theme of COVID-19, but now focusing on how to support children and their families. Children and teens are extremely vulnerable at this time and are not spared of the stress and anxiety brought about by the situation. We hope that this topic will help us provide support for the families of our patients as we transition to the new order of things. We thank the Philippine Society for Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics, represented here by its president, Dr. Agnes Falcotello, together with our speaker, Dr. Alexis L. Reyes, and our moderator, Dr. Mimi Avendaño, for organizing this very relevant topic. I would like to take this opportunity to announce to the PPS members that we would have our online national elections on June 15, 2020. We encourage all the members to participate in the election. Please note that there will be a mock election 1 week before the actual election, so we can iron out all the technical issues. Please watch out for further announcements regarding the election. Now, I enjoin you all to listen to our important topic today, entitled Coping with COVID-19, a for now normal for children and families. With this and in the future webinars, we aim to deliver relevant, timely, and quality scientific programs that would help us better serve the Filipino child. Again, a good day to all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eusebio. To give us an overview of today's topic and to introduce our expert, let us hear from the President of the Philippine Society for Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics, Dr. Agnes G. Falcotello.
Thank you, KG. Good day, everyone. The Philippine Society for Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics feels honored to host today's webinar. Everyday life has changed and will continue to change amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. What is the impact of these changes to the health of children? Experts say for children, we need to look beyond contracting the disease. With school closure, social distancing, and home quarantine, children may struggle with significant adjustments to their routines, which may interfere with their sense of structure, predictability, and security. Children compared to adults are more vulnerable to traumatic events in their lives. They are keen observers and they notice and react to stress in their homes and communities. They may ask questions as simple as what is COVID-19 or why do we need to quarantine, to more profound questions such as are they going to die or are they still going back to school? Children also may worry about safety of their loved ones. This is very challenging for all children, but is uniquely difficult for children with special health needs. In addition to keeping them physically safe during this pandemic, it is also our responsibilities as pediatricians to take care of their emotional and mental well-being. Today's talk will tackle the support that we can offer to all Filipino children and their families during these trying times. Having said that, I am delighted to introduce our highly treasured speaker, Dr. Alexis L. Reyes. Dr. Reyes is an epitome of the WHO five-star physician. She is a clinician, an educator, a manager, a social mobilizer, and a researcher. Let me add, she is also a great communicator. She is currently the president of the International Developmental Pediatrics Association, head of the Division of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics at UPPGH, director, Center for Autism and Developmental Medicine, St. Luke's Medical Center, Global City, member of the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Ambulatory Pediatric Association, and founding fellow and past president of the Philippine Society for Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. As the country's premier developmental and behavioral pediatrician, we will be learning a lot listening to her talk. Colleagues, please warmly welcome Dr. Alexis L. Reyes.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Agnes, for that very warm introduction. And it fits the occasion since it's a very warm afternoon. For this afternoon, I am tasked to talk about coping with COVID-19. We live in extraordinary times where every day we dread going out because there is a lot of fear and uncertainty about a virus. And for pediatricians like us who are advocates, I think it is important that we know how to help them, how to help our children, the ones we have vowed to serve, cope and understand what this particular disaster and pandemic means. So I would like to believe that we are sponsored today by a very famous character or group of characters in the Sesame Street program, because they have an initiative actually caring for each other, which they have launched since the pandemic started. You can avail of games, videos, and art materials for free in this particular website, and they are willing to actually help out, particularly families who are in difficulty. Children looking at these famous characters will feel very happy, and I think that it will serve its purpose as the days go by when one is isolated. So I have no competing financial interests, and I am very proud that this particular webinar is hosted by 3 associations: the Philippine Pediatric Society, of which Dr. Josie Eusebio is the president, the Philippine Society for Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics, of which Dr. Agnes Volcotelo is the president, and myself as the president of the International Developmental Pediatric Association. And what do we have in common? Proudly, we are all developmental pediatricians. So for this afternoon, I hope that this collaboration will be very important to all of you. So why not the new normal? Because when I was asked this particular topic, everybody was saying, I think you made a mistake. It should be the new normal. So I said, no, I prefer the title that was given by the Sesame Street group as the for now normal. Our routines have been disrupted, our lives have been disrupted, and that creates a lot of stress. And we can easily be overwhelmed by this. Children and grown-ups thrive on predictable routines, even if they're just for now, because there is always comfort in the familiar. So I have chosen the for now normal because I have really no idea what the new normal is going to be. I think that we are all waiting for what is going to happen after the ECQ is lifted. But then again, our role here this afternoon will be quite different in a sense that we hope to give a lot of advice and tips to our other colleagues with regards how to cope. And these are actually the objectives for this afternoon. Let me describe the current crisis, not in its medical entirety, because that will take an entire webinar in itself, but rather how its impact on the families and the children would be. I would like to also define the relevance of our role as pediatricians and also the role of parents and families. And finally, offer practical guidelines to help support children, families, and parents, and ourselves. We have to always remember that without our guidance, it will be very difficult to help the families and the parents. So little did we know that when we woke up January 1 of 2020, that we were going to be challenged by one of the most catastrophic pandemics that has ever affected the world. It is very different from the disasters that we have experienced. We just actually experienced a disaster, which was the volcanic eruption of Taal volcano. And after that, then this came. It started as a warning and in turn into a pandemic that has not only transformed life, it has paralyzed the airline industry, travel, it has paralyzed many businesses, and it has confined many of humanity in their homes. What kind of problem is this? And what consequences are we going to face? And that is the big question. It became a reality for us when our president started putting us on what he calls as the enhanced community quarantine. In other words, a lockdown. So we put all our normal lives on hold. Suddenly, we were all at home waiting for news to happen, and the news were not good. And today, a global total of about 300,000 people are now dead, and about 4 million have been infected. There is no agreed upon strategy on how to return life to normal. And this is what is very, very difficult for many of us because the uncertainty itself is going to be the fear that will grip us as we go through the days ahead. Every 4 o'clock, we used to have a 3 o'clock prayer, but every 4 o'clock, we wait for this particular bulletin from the Department of Health, which states the number of cases affected in the Philippines, the recoveries, and the deaths. This is not something that we look forward to because the numbers keep on increasing. And by the time this particular webinar is aired, it probably will reach more than 11,000, something that we are not happy to see. We hope that we will be able to flatten the curve, as they say. But then again, we don't really know what's going to happen ahead. So, you know, as an adult, talking about coronavirus is hard enough. And the numbers shift from day to day. And we talk about protective equipment, we talk about what to do, we talk about how to buy groceries, how to clean the groceries. But it is the abstract nature of the threat which is very invisible, that can invite plenty of fear and uncertainty. And the bigger problem is that as we are talking, others are listening, and these others are our children. And what are they listening? Maybe a lot of concern, a lot of fear in our voices. They can hear that, they can feel that. And that's the reason why we have to know what to do for our children. The impact on families, and I would like to emphasize this because family's well-being is directly related to a child's well-being. So what is the impact on families? Certainly, what you don't know, you're going to be afraid of. And you know that there are many consequences that this virus brings. And the anxiety actually of meeting people brings a lot of other mental health issues. There is also increased tension in parenting relationship because you're all together with the kids. Finally, in the house, everybody's there. But the most important hardship is that of the finances. Now, families who are already living in poverty, already in the margins, are going to struggle even more because of the day-to-day absence of resources. And this becomes a shock since there will be loss of paid employment. And this is going to be a very, very, very big struggle as we reach, hopefully, the end of this ECQ, where we don't really know where our money is coming from or our resources are going to come from. There was a study, not really a study, but rather a survey that was done early on in the coronavirus period on what has been affected on daily living. And clearly it's divided maybe equally, the day-to-day lifestyle. When we used to go somewhere, we're now not doing that. When we used to go to our clinics, we're not doing that. Our family lives, we're all together. We're seeing each other for the first time. We take family pictures now, and our working life. Work experiences have also changed. And this is the impact of the virus on daily living. But as we are so concerned with the coronavirus and we are focused on how to treat, avoid what drugs there are serious consequences that will challenge us even further. And those are the children, because they are the hidden victims. According to the UNICEF executive director, they are not yet front of mind. That means they are not yet prioritized, because our priority is really to find a cure for the coronavirus. As you can see from and hear from many of the television shows that you've watched, it's all about the COVID-19, but not about what's happening to the children. It's only now that we are seeing the impact. So the United Nations policy brief, and this is a wonderful piece of information that you can download easily from the United Nations website. There are three main channels which affect or create an impact on children. And these are as follows: infection with the virus itself. The second would be immediate socioeconomic impacts of the virus as it is being controlled or eradicated. And finally, the long-term effects of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now let's go through that one by one. So infection with the virus itself. So we are glad that it has not affected children as severely as that of adults. But we do see certain cases in the United Kingdom and the United States, which doctors have called as a pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome, something very similar to Kawasaki. However, there is still no solid data, so reports have been very, very limited insofar as this is concerned. So, but the more important effect of the virus would be from that of losing a parent, a caregiver or family member from the virus. And the psychosocial effects on children cannot be overlooked. The second would be the immediate socioeconomic impacts of the virus, as we are going to try to hopefully eradicate and find ways like the social distancing and hand washing and all these other mitigating factors that we have to do to slow down the virus spread. There will be less access to standard care for those families, or for those families, for children in particular, and also for pregnant women, because they are not going to be prioritized. There will also be partial or complete suspension of face-to-face child services. So what will happen to many of our communities who need nutritional support and who also need help insofar as maybe immunizations, other health services are concerned. And finally, what about the mental and the social well-being of children? And this is something quite difficult to note if you are not really focused on this particular population. So what are these social, emotional, mental health issues? It could range from anxiety, sadness, irritability, confusion, vulnerability, isolation, and being overwhelmed. And we know that where did these children get their stress? It is really from the parents, because there is such a thing as contagion of stress. If one is familiar with toxic stress, which is highlighted always by the group of Dr. Jack Shonkoff of the Center for the Developing Child, these are recurring and repetitive events wherein there is no caregiver that is going to help them. And that is actually going to be very, very, I would say, hard on the children who are technically victims already of this particular phenomenon. So it's almost like you were getting a post-traumatic stress, like the ones that they experienced after the war, because of the repetitive impact. And especially if you don't have a caregiver around, that will be very supportive. The third channel would be an important one insofar as our delivery of health. Services that are very important may be pushed on the side, and the long-term effects of the implementation of the SDG will include all those marginalized groups, wherein children may actually have problems because they will be recruited, child recruitment for those in these small areas, or those who are in places wherein they are in danger. It also tests, and is a very big test for global development and the prospects of today's young generation. So what will happen to all these children in the future? So the long-term effects are going to be very, very important to note. So while children are not the face of this pandemic, its broader impacts on child risk is catastrophic and has the most lasting consequences for societies as a whole. And that summarizes the first part of this particular set of information that I have given. Further on, as we look at what will happen to the children, there are also multiple dimensions of the impact. Many children, there are about 300 million children who are already in severe poverty, even before this crisis started. And it is expected that about 40 to 60 million more will be added to this group. The second would be exacerbating the learning crisis. Because of the lockdown, many schools have closed. So what will happen to our children? How will they learn? Especially those who do not have access to online or internet and other sources that are being used today. Third would be threats to child survival. What will happen to those who are already in camps, who are already in difficult situations or difficult circumstances, and what will happen to the health of these children? And finally, for those who are in abusive households, there will be greater risk to child safety. So as parents, we should share our latest information with the children. But you should explain it in a very simple, matter-of-fact, and age-appropriate way. You cannot tell that the coronavirus is a virus of an RNA material and so forth to a 2-year-old. So please, let us make certain that we know the information that we are giving as far as age is concerned. We need to also take our children's concerns seriously and not put them aside and help them deal with what they are seeing and feeling. And the issue actually here is that if adults cannot even make sense of this virus, what about children? So we look at ages and stages of understanding, from infants and toddlers, preschoolers, school-age children, and the adolescents. So let's go through that one by one for better understanding. Well, if you are a child below 2, you are blissfully unaware of what's happening, but somehow toddlers can sense when their parents are anxious or upset through their body language. So the guidelines for infants and toddlers is that please do not watch television or continually monitor social media using your phone or news feeds while holding, feeding, or playing with your infants and toddlers. The second is that I keep talking about routines because routines that are predictable are the best way to actually inform or tell your child that you know that they are secure, that they are safe, and the fact that you can actually predict what's going to happen next would be good. So what routines are these? Well, the routines of feeding, the routines of actually maybe dressing up, the routines of sleeping. These are important routines that one has to keep. And that's very significant for a toddler who doesn't really know what's happening in the world today. I would also like to focus on, again, information from the Center on the Developing Child. And they placed this particular information many years ago. We talked about this and we keep talking about this serve and return interaction. Why is it important to do serve and return? Because these are the nonverbal interactions that we do when a child actually reaches out to us. And it's so important to promote this since a child whose parent is not listening will feel neglected. And when you want to develop resilience, resilience being the ability to toughen up, to know what to do, and to be able to accept the impact of a situation, you have to actually perform what they call as active listening, something that many of us don't really do. But as far as pediatricians are concerned for this age group, what are the important basic health services that we miss? And these are immunizations. Interestingly, World Immunization Week occurred from the 24th to the 30th of April. This was covered during our ECQ. And I don't know whether anybody celebrated that. The missing immunizations, we don't have children going to the clinics to be immunized because they're afraid of the hospital. And there are already falling immunization rates. I would like to discuss the first two only because this pertains to the age group that I am talking about, which is the infants and toddlers. Let me discuss the rest as we go along to their ages. So if you talk about preschool, these are 3 to 5-year-olds with increasing language skills. So they can talk. And they're the talkers, really. They ask all these questions, questions that may not be very easy to answer, and questions that they probably heard from somebody else. However, even if they ask questions, they do not have the capacity yet to understand fully, to interpret, analyze, and process. And they're not expected to. So what are the things that you can do? What are the guidelines that we have for preschool children? First is do not watch TV shows while they're in the room or in listening distance, especially if the TV show is about, oh, somebody else died and these are the numbers that are, that and then these alarm the children even more because this group is a group with concrete thinking already. They can see. So visually, that is going to have an impact on them. Give out lots of hugs and reassurance because sometimes they just want to feel safe. What's happening? What's happening? And you don't know the answer. So just a lot of hugs and reassurance to express your love. Answer questions only as they come up, and please do not ask these questions or uh, initiate these questions with them, especially if you don't know the answers. Try to keep their routine consistent, and consistent routines for preschools would include play, a lot of play, free time, and also reading. I hope they are reading at this point. Divide and conquer. What does that mean? If you are husband and wife in the house, one will work on your particular activity at home and the other will play with the kids so that one is always with the kids. Respect short attention span. So sometimes when you answer their questions, you give this long, drawn answer. But then again, they have very short attention span. So please understand that some of them will just need a very short answer. Do exercise with your children in the house and provide creative play outlets to enable children to express their feelings. But the problem is our playgrounds are not exactly safe. And this is an example of a playground in New York where there are no children. Sad to see playgrounds that are empty. And for children, usually preschool children who have magical thinking, they may think that they're not being allowed to go to the playground is punishment for doing something bad. So what do we do now? So we eat, we pray, yes, we do, but we also play and we love. We have to harness the power of play as we stay and play at home. Now, this particular group, interestingly, already started a program in Batangas when the volcano erupted. And they are now creating a new program for all children all over the world. And you can access this through their Facebook page and get some of the sensory activities through this particular YouTube that they have written here. What else can you do? You can encourage reading. And these are some of the new books that have been made during this particular time. I'd like to point to the book on the upper right-hand corner, which was made by Aboriginal children for their parents, for the adults, because they want to share with them what they feel. And other books include familiar faces and familiar figures in our children's library. And new books, coloring books, in fact, are also used. But somehow, it is the screen time that is going to be very important for many. So to keep your child quiet, you will give your phone. Now, it's not allowed. So the UNICEF has given these guidelines on screen time. Staying in touch with friends is important, hence you can allow them the use of the phone. Active engagement and parental oversight are still necessary. And you don't just give the phone, you also monitor. And finally, physical activity done in front of the screens. And there are active video games and online exercise classes that you can access. And like this one, wherein the children are actually following an exercise being done by adults. And that's hopefully with the guidance of the parents. You can also encourage video chat, and this came from another source. And if you're going to give them screens, please choose the educational program that they're going to watch. These are stressful times. So you can forgive yourself for giving them the cell phone. However, there is a however. You have to choose good programs, and you have to also still monitor the time. Do not give it for the entire day. So when you watch and see these programs or play video games, you talk about what's happening on screen with your child. Hindi lang yung the only time that they're going, the only ones who are going to do the video games are them, but you can also play with them and ask them what's going on. And finally, it's a balanced diet. While they may be engaged with screens more than usual, they will have to still stop when you tell them to. Okay, so it's a little hard to balance because there are times when you feel that they need it more, and times when you feel that, what am I doing? Am I giving them a very bad example? Okay, so what does the American Academy of Pediatrics say? So before the pandemic, this was the list of guidelines that the American Academy of Pediatrics have written up. No screen time less than 18 months, minimal after that until 24 months with a parent, 1 hour a day of high quality programs at 2 to 5, and no specific time limit at 6 years. Although I do not really agree with the last one, because I think that there has to be always some time limit, and one doesn't use this during weekdays, especially for those who are already studying. But during the pandemic, it is unavoidable to allow them a little more than the usual, but do not abuse. That's the problem. Many children abuse. And make time for offline experiences. So, hindi naman kailangan parating naka-online. Okay? Challenge children to practice tech control. So if they can, you tell them that, oh, maybe it would be great for you to cut your screen time for this hour or for this shorter period. And there should be no screen time 1 hour before bedtime. Bedrooms are also device-free rooms, and you have to keep it that way. Okay, for school-age children, 5 to 12 years of age, will have different needs. The younger the child, the more you should keep the discussion very direct and simple. However, the older child, the more they need to ask their questions and share their fears with you. This time, there is a sharing. So just get the facts straight, and please do not give them fake news. Try to keep your opinions out of it. Share your feelings with children, but do not overwhelm them. Your desire to say that, I have to wear this PPE, and, mommy is always very, very hot inside. You can share that by saying that, mom's having a hard time when she goes to the hospital. Okay, that's enough. And be a role model. Now, that's hard, because being a role model means that you have to be able to control your fears as well. Enlist their help. Make them clean the room. Make them do other things. Help in the kitchen. Let's bake cookies. So that's the reason why you do not flatten the curve, you fatten the curve. Keep an eye on social media, and that's very, very significant. And I've mentioned that before. And find creative outlets. This is the time to really think about what you have in your house that you can actually do and use to distract the children, school-age children. But the problem is, and the bigger problem is, that schools in 188 countries, according to UNESCO, has been suspended. And over 90% of enrolled learners, about 1.5 billion young people worldwide, are now out of education. Before, you had school to protect your time, but now there is no more school. So what do you do when there is no school available? What is the general impact on school closures? First is, it widens the learning gap between children from lower income and higher income families. Because many have shifted to online education, others can't because they do not have any connectivity. Others don't even have phones in their house. Well, that's interesting to note. In the Philippines, we have to do a survey on that. The second would be it initiates the shifting to an online curriculum. I've heard that the online curriculum is available for public schools, and I'll talk to you about that in a while. And they have done this because we have experienced so many disasters. It is a good time to apply this. But there is a need for the faculty to be engaged and connected. And that's the problem. Are all our faculty, are all our teachers in sync with what they're doing? The third is it promotes global homeschooling. I have no problems with global homeschooling. I think it is a positive addition, but well, I would say that it's my opinion, but I see it as a complement to input in schools and not as a standalone, although a lot of people will probably not be happy with that statement. But I know that it can be done successfully. However, it's hard to generalize how many parents can actually do homeschooling, and that is the question, the bigger question. The fourth would be the patterns of assessment have changed. There is a cancellation of internal assessments, which may not reflect your child's progress. So you don't know what's happening to your child. You don't know whether you congratulate your child for doing well, because you're probably going to get your grades at the end, and or you're probably not going to get any grades at all. So there's poor recognition, therefore, of high parental and learning difficulties. So both the high potential, those who are gifted, and those who have limitations. And other initiatives which I would like to actually mention in this particular slide would be the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, wherein they launched the Lockdown Learners, a series of online dialogues. And I wanted to add this because it puts emphasis on values, on building skills to empower them, the children, and on teaching them to think. So now we can do without all those things that they need to memorize. Now we can look at a curriculum that is actually targeted towards more important things that you will now use in your life. And also, thank you, Josie, for this, Coping with Coronavirus. This is from a book, The Chronicle on Higher Education, wherein faculty members are being given some advice on how to support students in traumatic situations. So what about the other groups of children? Specific groups of children would have different consequences. So in an abusive home, social distancing may result in social isolation. So the children are now at home. Now, if the parents are abusive, then this will be exacerbated. For children and adolescents with mental health issues, such closures mean a lack of access to resources like counseling and or resources like medication use and or guidance. And for special education needs like those with autism, for instance, who become very frustrated, short-tempered, aggressive, because their daily routines are disrupted, these children are going to have such a big problem. And parents are going to have to address these problems as a priority. So I talked about teachers. And as far as teachers are concerned, in this particular webinar, which the Philippines actually presented in the UNESCO COVID-19 Education Response Webinar, which was held on March 27, quite early on during the lockdown, there are education issues that our government has already started, and they have, and I've looked this up. commons.edgov.ph is actually a platform that they have done, as I mentioned, for those children who are in disaster areas. But this time, the whole country has a global pandemic, so this can be used. But the problem is that there's a lack of connectivity throughout our country. Hence, this online educational platform is going to be very limited. There's also the use of paper-based homework for those without internet access. We have looked into teachers' well-being by the early release of their salaries. However, their performance reviews have been temporarily suspended. Now, how do we know who is a good teacher and who's not at the end of the day? And somehow, this has an impact on many of our children. So finally, the most challenging group, I would say, are the adolescents. Young adolescents are going through what we call an egocentric phase of development, and the world really revolves around them. And they may focus, well, what else? The loss of their social lives. They are not going to have parties, graduation parties. There is no team sport offered. They have also no opportunity. For instance, you plan to drive this summer. There's no chance to do that anymore. Older adolescents are entering the stage of abstract thinking, but they are not quite there yet. This is actually where the driving is more applicable, because this is going to be the age group. So what happens to adolescents? The coronavirus appears to affect teenagers more, and it's explained by the fact that stress and social isolation heightens psychiatric vulnerability. And these children, even without any problems, already create problems. You know, some of them are very emotionally loaded and or sensitive, and having these two in combination exacerbates psychological difficulties. There is also the absence of peer interaction, which will actually affect their social skills. And without friends to hang out with, boredom can actually lead to risky behaviors. So they may drink, they may be, well, the example that was given was cheating, but there's no school. So how are they going to cheat when they're given online homework, I guess? And without classmates to work collaboratively, academic motivation may decline. So what are our guidelines? Very similar, however, more extended for adolescents. We have to get the facts straight. This time we can talk about information about the coronavirus, set rules of the household together. So let's sit together and let's find out how we can, because it's going to be transitioning. They're transitioning to adulthood already. So they have to know and they have to have responsibility. Routines still matter. So let them throw the, what is important or what is necessary to be thrown out from their rooms. Let them clean their rooms. Let them help with cooking. Be straight about their role in containing the COVID. So wash hands, and they have to make certain that they're also able to help, especially when the groceries come in. How do you clean those groceries? You have to be very patient. You're already patient, but you have to be doubly patient. And respect goes both ways. Now, this is the group that may be prone to depression, anxiety disorders. So watch out for signs if your teen may need more support, because in this time of the pandemic, it is hard to look for, and or although this is available, hard to look for counselors and psychiatrists. I cannot leave this discussion without talking about my special population. The special needs population, how do we empower students with disabilities during this COVID-19 crisis? A very big question that we have raised in our society. And there are so many barriers to education. We're not talking even about assessments, we're talking about just education. So in a health crisis like this, our children with disabilities are often provided with less help and maybe with inadequately trained teachers. It's not surprising if your teachers will actually leave and or resign because of this particular health threat. So you're left with teachers who are not as well trained. So more time and resources are required for children also with disabilities to actively participate in learning. So you have to have some special equipment because some of them may not be able to use the internet that well, and or they are not, the internet actually may not be as effective in teaching. They like to see their classmates. They like to see people. Finally, they're also negatively affected because they lose access in some parts of the world to school meals where it is free and really to play with their friends, which will be important for the development and learning. So that's a lot to digest in the last few minutes. However, to make it easy for us, the World Health Organization this time, in collaboration with 6 other agencies, have prepared these very colorful posters, which include 6 one-page tips on how to cover planning. And I will go through this one by one. It's downloadable at the websites below, especially at the WHO international website. The first is one-on-one time. I don't think that you will ever get an opportunity to talk to your child one-on-one or have your child one-on-one. Spend time with your child. I think this is the silver lining because now you have time to see your child, talk to them. You have probably not seen your child for ages and see your child only at bedtime. But now this is the time to talk to your child and listen to them. Look at them and give them your full attention. Switch off the television and phone. This is supposed to be a virus-free time, okay? The second poster is keeping it positive. Now, this is a problem because if you're not positive, then how can they be positive? So, say the behavior you want to see, like, oh, you did so well. And instead of making a mess, oh, you have placed your clothes in the right box or bin. It's all in the delivery and don't keep shouting. And you can hear the shouts, especially now that you're locked down, you can hear your neighbors. Get real also. Praise your child when they're behaving well and help your team stay connected. Team stay connected. Third would be to structure up. I'm a believer in routines, in structure, and the structure means that you can include there hand washing and hygiene, keeping safe distances, but it has to also be flexible. So you have a daily structure, but there's some flexibility. And at the end of the day, tell your child about one positive thing that he or she did and praise yourself for what you did very well. You are a star. The fourth would be bad behavior. Oh, this has been the most number of calls that I have received since the lockdown on aggressive behavior. They hit each other, siblings fighting over a toy, children with autism becoming more aggressive. And they're asking me if I could give medications. Well, that's not usually the solution to that particular question, but we have to learn how to redirect. At the end of the day, we have to use consequences. For children with autism, we have to find a trigger. The lack of routine, the absence of this routine is probably the reason why they are having aggression. Fifth is to keep calm and manage stress. Easier said than done. But you are not alone. You have to take a break, and all of us need to take a break. All of us need to listen to the kids, and you have to set up a comfortable place, think, feel, and ask yourself, there's this 1 minute relaxation activity that you can do, and focus on your breathing and reflecting. So how many opportunities do we get to reflect when we go to work every day? In those days pre-COVID, we just look at the traffic and we're already harassed. So this time there is no traffic and we are still harassed. And the last one is talking about the COVID-19. Now, you have to be willing to talk. And you have to be, as I mentioned, an active listener. Be open and listen. Allow your child to talk freely. Then ask them open-ended questions on how much they already know. I will leave the second because this one is going to be discussed in my next slide. And the third would be supportive. It is okay not to know all the answers. Dr. David Schoenfeld, who was our guest and has been in the Philippines quite a number of times, is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician and the director of the National Center for School Crisis and Bereavement. He says that his wonderful webinar that was promoted by the American Academy of Pediatrics during this particular time, he said that we should initiate the conversation with older children. That's not the younger ones. Start by asking them what they've heard and how they are feeling and what questions they have. It's the how they are feeling. Are they feeling sad? Are they feeling angry? Don't pretend everything is okay. No, it's okay. It's all going to be there just talking about this, and children pick up when parents are not honest. Children may also pick up on concerns of the adults. We have no more money. Okay, and then your children will actually tell that to all your neighbors that are in shouting distance. Be honest. So the more important question is how to help you. Now, the art and science of stress is really a remarkable, very extensive discussion, which I will not dwell on today because I think it is warm enough. And I think we should be able to complete this discussion or this talk in a few minutes. Time warps so that the present moment is elongated. We don't even know what day it is. And sometimes we ask ourselves, where did my decision-making skills go? They went offline. And frustrating as it may be, you have this sort of brain fog. Parang something's going wrong, you know. But this is very protective because it tells us that what we're experiencing is not really normal. We should now feel our emotions, understand what's happening if we can. And our creativity and bursts of productivity are likely to be fleeting at this time. However, it will come back when the existential threat will be gone. So is it selfish when we help ourselves? When you have quarantine fatigue or when you actually are with your children or with just yourself in the condominium for the past few weeks and or the past 2 months to be exact, it's not being selfish to help yourself. Practical advice would include that you get enough sleep, sunlight, and take care of yourself. Whatever it is that makes you happy, please do it. Stay well informed, but you don't close naman the television and not know what's going on. You stay connected with friends. And this is something that, you know, I would say that social media has done for us, you know, the Viber threads, the Viber groups. Well, too much yung 100 Viber groups naman. Okay. Pace yourself and do something fun. Please don't enroll in every webinar that you see. It looks good, it's free, and you become a PhD already for that. And please don't be bothered when the PPS webinar does not open up for you. There are other times that you can do it. Learn to be mindful. Help people find hope after loss. I included this particularly because of the number of colleagues that I have personally known who have passed away due to the coronavirus. And you can write, you can draw, you can paint. So many things can be done that you have not done before. So open up your cabinets and find the things that you have kept for yourselves for a rainy day. And laugh. So I'm always happy to receive happy thoughts, happy games, in our Viber thread, especially in our socials group in our society. There is this next slide actually just tells you about some of the self-care tools that you can access as apps. And one of them is particularly, and always mentioned, is Headspace. I haven't looked at that myself, but then if you're the type to look at this, then maybe you can share this with your teens. Finally, carrying the honorable title, or this very honorable already, to be a healthcare worker. Pag healthcare worker ka, nauuna ka sa linya. They have many hidden pressures that one endures daily while working within the profession. They think that all of us are in the front line, not all of us. But I think that all of us are trying to help those who are in the front line. I believe that fate will not create our new normal, but coping well with stress and making good and relevant choices will. And by this, I'm saying that there are times when we miss people, especially Sally, who actually gave the opening remarks for our International Developmental Pediatric Association conference last December. And for that, Sally, we are eternally grateful, and we will always, always remember you. And these are the days when we miss you, because I think that you would have liked this particular presentation. My last slide is that of an artist who is a street artist in London. And he said that this is a game changer because the new hero that he is holding in his hands is now the healthcare worker, and he set aside his old heroes. So with this, stay safe, stay brave, and take care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Alexis, for a very insightful and helpful and inspiring discussion on what we can do to help families navigate this very challenging time. Moving forward, may I call on the Psdbp Vice President, Dr. Erminilda Vendaño, to moderate the question and answer part.
Okay, thank you and good afternoon. So there have been a lot of questions sent, but because of time constraints, we would only be able to read a few questions for Dr. Reyes to answer. First off, parents with school-age children are worried about how the new normal, or as Dr. had said it, the now normal, would affect their children's education. Virtual learning and homeschooling are now considered, and schools are actually preparing for this. So these options may be difficult for parents who have full-time jobs, to the point that some parents are considering their children to skip a school year. So how will these options impact their child's development, and how can parents prepare the children and the environment for such changes?
That's a hard question, Mimi. I think that it should be answered by a task force on education, because I agree that losing a year is going to actually be detrimental to the development of your child. What will you do in the year? And if you do not have any access to online resources, this child will literally be out of school. And we do not encourage that at all. So I think that we can take it from what the Department of Education has already established and or given to us. We can look at that, and maybe we can, they are actually, I think that I've read that they are actually reaching out to the private schools as well. So this is a public school initiative. Now they're reaching out to the private schools, so it may be a good time to join forces and see what we can do for the children that we will not be able to access services just because their parents are not available. So I think that maybe these platforms will have to be reassessed, including the assessment tools that we need to use for both the teachers and the students. I hope that answered the question. It's a little hard to answer that.
Okay, next question. We are all aware of the benefits of establishing routines for children. Are there any sample routines we could advise the parents to implement? It may actually be a case-to-case basis, but it will be helpful if we can give them an outline of some sort.
You are right. It is a case-to-case basis, and not only a case-to-case, but an age-to-age basis. So it depends on the age. I think if they're younger, then we're looking at activities that are play-based, and I would think that more of the routines at home. So they are the life skills. And when they get into school age, then we can talk about how we can uh, have a good balance between academic assistance or academic resources, plus exercise, plus free time. I think that that is important, you know, free time. What kind of free time do we want to put in? So I would imagine that we have to tailor it according to the needs of the child.
Okay. So one thing that I see a lot of questions here stated is that we have always stuck to the time limits of screen time, right? So we have always advocated for minimized screen time, but the way things are being planned now, especially with the advent of online schooling, learning something new online, it would seem contradictory. So do we, number one, do we still stick to the rule? How long of an exposure to screen time would we recommend to schools? Would there be a science to back this up? Because with that, the limits maybe would the limits be the same for all children? So, Doktora, yun yung problem natin. Yung may sinabi ka about extending it. But if school is from 7 to 5, how would we arrange this? How can we help the teachers? How can we guide them?
That's another difficult question. You love questions that are difficult, Mimi. So, I would like...
Magdami nating audience na nagsabi nito.
Okay. So, I would like to define siguro screen time and online teaching. So, screen time would be the use of your gadgets for purposes, I would say, of leisure and primarily leisure, because in this particular discussion by the American Academy of Pediatrics, they're talking about how much they are going to use their gadgets for video games and so forth. So that probably has to have a happy balance between the number of hours that are still acceptable. And I think that we can extend it a bit, but not too much. And versus the online. So if you have an online program, but I think it's also a little long to have, they are talking about internationally about shortened times in terms of schooling. So they're talking about like 3 to 4 hours instead of the usual, because it's harder to watch a screen versus to have actual classmates. And that is being discussed by different countries on how they will go about it. And maybe we should look at examples that are closer to our country, where the low and where within the low and the middle income resource countries. So we're looking at India, and we're looking at all the other countries who also belong to the International Development, the IDPA. So we would like to have a discussion with them. We hope that in the future we can have a webinar, I guess, to discuss this impact on education.
Okay. So again, in terms of schooling, private schools may have easy access for online classes. But what about for the public schools? Not all will have the capability to use the internet. So would they still have the same curriculum? And in like manner, in relation to the curriculum, what should children be now learning with the resumption of classes? Should it be the theoretical stuff, or should they teach life lessons, values, etc.?
I particularly love that part wherein the lockdown learners, about the lockdown learners, where they placed emphasis on the teaching of values and the more important things in life. Now that we have experienced this type of catastrophe and disaster, a disaster where nobody can help us because we're all globally affected, I think that we have to rethink about or do a lot of thinking about what will be the core elements of our curriculum be like. Will they necessarily involve values now more than theoretical information that they may not likely use. So, and or shouldn't we teach them skills that they are going to need in the future, because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to take. So should we not teach them skills like resilience, patience, and other important ways to handle difficult scenarios? I think that this is a good time to reboot ourselves. And like you've said, sadly, the answer to the question on the public schools is up in the air, because I don't really know how we're going to reach out to all these children who may not have access to the internet.
Okay, so this is for pediatricians. We pediatricians want to get back to our routines, for example, going back to the clinics, but things are somehow different. We know that short patient contact time is already advocated. How can we check on the child and even the parents' anxiety and coping with the situation? What do we ask the child or the parents during encounters, whether they be telehealth or already face-to-face?
We have made, well, I think I have attended several discussions on this with different hospitals, and a lot of them, a majority would say that perhaps before the encounter itself, we can prepare something that the parent can answer. So a question on the child's emotional state and or mental health, so that it lessens the time that we need to, to use when we do a face-to-face encounter. And besides, we also need to know the health status of the child. So that's also part of the pre-encounter that we need to do, or the I would say the planning that we have to do prior to seeing them face to face. So it's a little hard because we're doing this, I would say, experimentally. So, but what works, I guess, would be the fact that face-to-face encounters are still and always will be the best. And if we can maximize that short period of time that we have with them, at least they see us, except that they don't touch us, then I think that's the most important part.
Okay. As a corollary to that, the Psdbp has actually come up with a compilation of helpful tips and resources, and this is entitled Supporting Children and Teens During the COVID-19 Pandemic. This can be seen in the PPS website under the heading of COVID resources. So next question, would the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic be different for children with special needs? And how do we go about explaining these things to them?
You will have more problems with children with disabilities, simply because even the very nature of our examination, the very nature of our assessment, and face-to-face encounters with these children will change. And the impact on them will vary. I would think that there's no easy answer there, in a sense that we will have to deal with different categories of children. Children with autism, for instance, may have a different set of guidelines as those with cerebral palsy, for instance. And that goes without saying that even therapy will change. The entire narrative of therapy will be very different. So I would imagine that we will spend a lot of sleepless nights. We already have a lot of sleeping nights, so let's spend a lot of sleepless nights to work on this particular aspect.
Okay. Due to time constraints, this will be our last question. How would you answer a child when he asks you, kailan po ako pwedeng pumasok muli? Kailan po ako pwedeng makipaglaro sa mga kaibigan ko? And I think the more profound one is, kailan po matatapos ang COVID-19 pandemic?
The $100 million question. Buti na lang at may lumabas na information, at I would direct people to read this New York Times article just out today. When I say today, May the 11th because it talks about how or when the pandemic ends. So the particular author gave two responses. It could be a medical and it could be a social end. Ano yung medical? So medical is if we find the virus. I mean, we find the vaccine to help us cure the virus or to stop the virus from spreading. So that's the medical. But the social one is the interesting one. When people are sick and tired, frustrated, they want to get out. So the lockdowns are actually not in place anymore. So people are going to be out there in the open and probably just exposing themselves. But then again, I think there's a third component, which is the political component. So social political component, hindi mo alam kung kailan tatanggalin ang lockdown. So, hindi rin natin alam kung anong mangyayari. So, I would like to be honest, like Dr. Schoenfeld said, and tell this child, siguro, gawin natin yung pwede natin gawin para maibsan ang problema na to, paghuhugas ng kamay, hindi tayo may konting panahon pa para gawin natin ang mga dapat nating gawin na tinuro sa atin na sana at hindi natin kalimutan ding magdasal para tayo ay mabigyan ng proteksyon. So as we are a country that believes in God, I think that this is very helpful, and I've answered this question. When a question like this cropped up in an international conference, I gave that answer that we put a lot of faith in God. So I would not remove the hope in this child and would not say something that is dishonest, but rather that I will ask her to do the things that she needs to do, and perhaps just keep praying that this catastrophe, this major pandemic is over.
Okay, well said, Dr. Reyes. So this ends our question and answer. I now turn you back to Dr. KG Gutierrez.
Thank you very much to our speaker, Dr. Alexis Socorro Reyes, and our moderator, Dr. Mimi Avendaño, and to the Philippine Society for Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics, headed by Dr. Agnes Falcotello. Thank you also to Child Health Informatics Committee, headed by Dr. Judith Fatima Garcia, and CPD Online, led by Dr. Flerida Hernandez, for making all these online activities possible. In behalf of CHIC and CPD Online, we acknowledge and apologize for the difficulty members are encountering when logging in the CPD portal on the official PPS website. These problems were brought about by the limitations of the portal's bandwidth, as the portal was not initially intended for webinars. Once the ECQ is lifted and the technical company is back in operation, we will increase the CPD portal's bandwidth. In the meantime, while still on current bandwidth, you can access the webinars via the CPD portal or via Docwity. Each webinar will be available for viewing for about 2 weeks. Please take note also that CPD portal works best when viewed on a laptop, in which you should disable blocked pop-ups. The next topic will be on May 28, 2020, with the Philippine Society of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology at the helm. The topic for the scientific meeting will be the immunology of COVID-19 and immunology of severe COVID-19 cytokine storm. Thank you, my fellow pediatricians, and stay safe.